How's it going, guys? I am Matthias, and recently I picked up a OnePlus One, and you guys have been super curious about my thoughts on it. This review is going to be largely based on usability of the device. Now, this is not a new phone by any means, and there are already a ton of reviews out there. So I'm going to be focusing more on my experience with the phone rather than benchmarking and comparing specs to existing phones. That being said, quickly summarizing the specs, the OnePlus One comes in two different models. The variation being only the color and the internal storage. Silk White coming in with 16 gigabytes for $299 and Sandstone Black with 64 gigs for $349. Naturally, the 64 gig version Sandstone Black model is a no-brainer, only being $50 more for 48 more gigs. That is where the differences between those two models stop. Both versions run in at about 162 grams, which is on the heavier side for phones with a display size of 5.5 inches. The OnePlus One is rocking a tried and tested Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 processor with 2.5 GHz quad-core CPUs and 3 gigs of RAM, equipped with an accelerometer, gyroscope, ambient light sensor, proximity sensor, as well as NFC and GPS. Buying a phone was a bit of a pain, however, with their invite system still in place. Recently, in February, they improved the availability of the device, allowing anyone to buy it so long as they did it on a Tuesday. Personally, when I decided I wanted one, I waited for a following Tuesday, and it was weeks before I actually got an invite after I had already gotten the phone. I find it a bit strange that it's been well over a half year since this device was available to the public, and this invite system is still in place. At first, people were a bit annoyed, commenting on how it was a tired marketing tactic, but at this point, I wonder if they just can't find a cost-effective way to satisfy the demand for the device. There was a bright spot, however, when purchasing the device, one that I hadn't experienced in years. Tax is included in the final price for most countries. That was a pleasant surprise, considering tax on $350 while living in LA would be around 35 bucks. When I first opened up the box, there was one thing that first struck me: the texture of the black sandstone. It is unlike anything I have felt on a phone before. Soft to the touch, the texture almost felt like rough denim. I find that I have a different opinion of the texture than most. On one side, it was very tactile, so the odds of dropping the phone are much lower compared to an aluminum phone. However, to me, the texture feels cheap. Cheaper than just a normal smooth finish. I equate it to the same principle of drywall and stucco. One of the main reasons why interior and exterior walls are textured is to hide imperfections in less expensive materials. So that's kind of the impression that it gave me, even though the Sandstone Black model is actually more expensive. However, that's not the case, as simply dragging a fingernail with the moderately light force can make it extremely visible scuff. If you're lucky, the scuff will fade over time, but you definitely can't rub it out. It tends to collect pocket lint, and I find myself constantly wiping the device down with an open palm to remove it. The phone is pretty big, roughly the same size as an iPhone 6 Plus, with smaller space on the top and bottom bezel, which makes it interesting that the power button and volume rockers are so insanely tiny. I have relatively large hands, so finding the buttons can be somewhat tricky. Not only are they tiny, but they are extremely low profile and provide very little action upon pressing. I frequently have issues finding the correct orientation of the device so I can wake it after I pull it out of my pocket or pick it up off my desk. From a visual standpoint, the phone is very stylish with its chrome bezel, but that symmetry ends up getting me in the long run, with the only visible cue to find the orientation of the device being the well-hidden front-facing camera. Not a huge issue at all, but one that will consistently annoy you. A great addition to the phone is the capacitive buttons for those that don't like to take up space on the display with the on-screen buttons. They are extremely dim, even indoors, but it's not a big issue since their placement will never move. Another thing that I would note about the design of the phone is kind of an awkward NFC placement. The NFC reader is placed towards the bottom of the back of the phone, so interacting with payment terminals and NFC tags can be a bit clunky and awkward at times. One final thing about the design is the USB port on the phone. It's upside down, well, at least to every other cable and dock, so that when I'm using a dock, it's actually placed backwards. Since most cables come with an identifier on which side is the top of a USB cable, this one you're gonna have to turn them all around, adding more confusion to how you plug in the cable. Overall, I'm impressed with the display for the price of the device. The OnePlus comes with a full 1080p LTPS IPS panel. Anything above 401 ppi is generally overkill. The IPS is incredibly sharp with great viewing angles. The TOL, or touch on lens, basically means reduced distance between the touch sensors and the display, making it roughly 300% more shatterproof. I found colors to be slightly inaccurate on the OnePlus One due to the high color temperature of the display. The higher color temperature of the device makes the whites of the display seem more blue than true white. I also noticed a slight red spike that also affected the accuracy of the display. You can adjust this with third-party apps by shifting colors, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you are experienced with coloring. I was able to adjust the display with the Color Monkey display display calibrator, even though it's not supported on this phone. The OnePlus One comes with a 3100 milliamp hour non-removable battery. It's a big battery that should be more than enough to last you throughout the day, so long as you watch out for those runaway applications. I find that by the end of the day, I'm left with a 20% charge, and I use the phone quite a bit. The only issue I did have with charging was the cable that came with the phone. In an effort to push for style, OnePlus sacrificed quality. This cable will not stay in its power brick. Even the slightest pull will disconnect the cable. Sure, you can just get another cable or use one of your existing cables to avoid the issue, but you really shouldn't have to. I was impressed with the 13 megapixel rear camera. In terms of picture taking, it gave me relatively accurate color rendering with the ability to shoot RAW. I would stay away from shooting video on the OnePlus One. Sure, it shoots in 4K, but it's generally washed out with an extremely low dynamic range. The audio in the video leaves something to be desired as well. I expected more from the front-facing 5 megapixel camera, as OnePlus claims it's distortion free. However, I noticed an extreme amount of sharpening that most likely happens somewhere in the software. For those looking to use it just for a selfie camera to upload to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, it's usable, but I would sooner ask someone to take a picture with the better rear camera. I wanted to wait a bit to do this review because OnePlus was planning on releasing their Oxygen OS based on Lollipop sometime in late March, but that never actually ended up happening. It ended up being pushed back to the end of the second quarter or the beginning of the third quarter. The OnePlus One currently runs Cyanogen Mod 11, as we are still waiting on 12 based on Lollipop as well. The phone runs pretty quick. I noticed occasional frame rate drops, but not too much. There are a lot of great tweaks that Cyanogen offers, such as gestures to wake the device, start the camera app, or turn on the torch, which seemed to activate in my pocket constantly until I turned it off. There's a lot of customizability with Cyanogen, and it's arguably one of the best skins out there. So, is the OnePlus One worth it? Definitely. At least the 64GB version is a no-brainer. What's important to remember is that this is a flagship quality device on a budget price. And for that price, almost all the issues I had with the phone are completely forgivable. Aside from that damn cable. I don't know why that annoyed me so much. This is a great phone if you're considering moving over to Android from iOS, or you just want to experiment, as this doesn't really require a huge investment. If you don't take pictures constantly and you have an issue dropping your current slippery device, this may be the device for you. And at that price, it's really hard to beat. Let me know if you'd like to see more detailed reviews like this in the future by liking this video. And let me know down in the comments below what you'd like to see me review next. Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing to MTech for more of the same. See you next time.